Welcome to the Business Spotlight. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your podcast host on the show today. And today we have our guest, Aamar Khwaja, CEO of Mod Garden. We're going to share his story, his business journey to business ownership, best practices, and maybe some challenges that he's faced on his journey to give you that inside scoop to what it's like to own and operate a business. If this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications when we drop episodes like this. It is so great to meet you, Aamar. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, um, I have been I've been running a startup for the last I would say nine-ish odd years. But before that, I was in banking. I spent about 15 years on Wall Street, and that was probably the blueprint for the challenge that I'm facing today in my business.
Oh, okay. I am excited to hear more about that. You said 15 years on Wall Street
Yes,
prior to
15 years
that?
on Wall Street. Yes, in New York.
Oh, wow. Well, okay. So, how has that impacted like the why behind your business of like Mod Garden?
Yeah, so um, it actually began way. It almost feels like the work that I'm doing right now um, was designed with my previous life, and it started all the way back in, I would say, in my pre-adolescence when I got sick or when I was sick. I used to suffer from headaches way back then, and they progressively got worse. And by the time I got to university and started my job, my headaches had gotten so debilitating that they had turned into migraines that I had to visit an emergency room to get to have them administer codeine or Demerol to take care of the pain. I used to beg
Mm,
for the codeine.
mm,
Um, and then there was the eczema, but it doesn't start off as eczema, right? It's one of those things which starts off as innocuous dry skin. And as far back as I can remember, I've always had dry skin. And you just kind of like, pop up. We come from a pop up pill culture, and so you do surprise moisturizer and you forget about it. But by the time I had graduated university, NYU, my hands were so chronic that whenever I picked up my briefcase, they would tear. The skin on them would tear. So it wasn't until I left Wall Street that I started looking into my own health. And somebody gave me magnesium, and my headaches went away and my eczema went away. I mean, of course, it was coupled with lifestyle changes.
mm.
But I asked myself, what the heck is magnesium and where does it come from? Because 100 years ago, we didn't have magnesium in a pill. And so I began to, the short answer is food. And so I began to look into food. I began to look into farming and farming practices in America and California and all that, and where are foods really coming from. And what I found mortified me.
Mm.
The inputs that are going into our soil, the way industrial farming today, 99.3% of the farms, the way that we eat food is grown on industrial farms as a source. And they're using some of the worst possible chemicals. And if you look at life expectancy rates across the G7, across the Western economic hemisphere, you'll notice that for the last 5 decades, most of the G7, G6, Japan is maybe flatlined, have all been falling for the last 5 decades. And that is a wake up call. And so for me, my headaches was a small price to pay to gain an understanding of what's really going on in our food system. And so that led me to Mod Garden, where I'm, basically trying to give people access to pure food.
Wow, you touched on so many things that I'm very passionate about. I also take magnesium for my headaches. So
Wow.
that's interesting. Yes. So what you're saying is very much what is going on in our world, and to kind of dive in a little bit and geek out about obviously our soil depletion and the things like
Hmm.
our food starts with the soil, and if our soil is lacking those nutrients like magnesium, it is going to have a huge impact on our health, especially with things are filled in there with like other junk that doesn't belong in our body. So I'm really excited to dive into this
Awesome.
conversation. Okay,
Awesome.
so that's like your why. That's a very passionate story, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad you found relief as a, especially after all of those headaches. And so, let's dive into the business. So we have your why, and now let's talk a little bit about your team. As a business is growing, what does your team look like? How many members do you have right now on your team, and are you looking to grow?
So we're still considered a pre-seed startup. So I'm basically the founder of the startup, a founder of Mod Garden. My team is made up of fractional people, so they're not full time. We've raised about six to $700,000 when I was in Toronto, where I started this company, and there were various pivots and all that, and now I've ended up in Austin. We've kind of crossed the chasm where we've moved away from a direct to consumer business and more to a B2B direction. So I've got fractional CFO, I've got fractional CMO, I've got a chief operating officer. They're all kind of waiting on the wings, helping out until we get the next round of funding. And so we're basically waiting for the next round of funding to come in before we begin to finish the pilots that we're doing in Austin and then launch a Series A after that.
That's incredible. And how much are you, if you don't mind sharing, like what's your goal
Yeah,
for what's your next seed funding round?
sure. So this pre-seed funding round is we're targeting 500,000. And then we would do a multi-million dollar raise for seed and Series A.
Okay. Um, well, that's incredible. And like looking kind of at the next 3 to 5 years as this develops, what's your timeline looking like for the next few years?
So what we would do is we would run a pilot for the next 6 to 9 months, prove out the business model. We're bringing the farm to the urbanite. That's actually what we're doing. We're trying to mimic the way we used to live in farming or agri-centric communities 100 years ago. But now
Hmm.
the reality that we live in today is a concrete jungle. There is no, Austin's kind of a better city, but
Hmm.
you can see what's happening in Austin. It's going to turn into something like a New York potentially, or Toronto, or a Shanghai, where more and more buildings and concrete are being laid ever expansively, and the greenery is all disappearing. And so what we're doing is we're saying, well, we cannot change that trend in building and real estate development. So how do we embrace that and bring the farm to the urbanite? Because our organic farms are just moving further and further away. So we'll prove that model out during this 6 to 9 month pilot after we raise our funding, and then after that we'll begin to do a scale up, and the scale up will be into retirement homes. We'll bring the farm into retirement homes. We'll bring the vertical farm into restaurants, as we're doing right now with the luxury hotel. We'll bring the farm into schools so that people can harvest, greens right on premises. And then one of our other targets is condo towers. So imagine that you're living on the 26th floor, and then you walk down to the third floor communal gardening room. You pick up whatever greens you want and you take them upstairs, and at the time of dinner you harvest them on the spot. So that's our 3-ish year goal, is to proliferate across and scale up across the US, and then we will start the direct to consumer business where we sell our tiny farms to consumers directly.
Okay, I see I kind of where you're going with your ideal clients would be like right now that B2B. Uh,
Correct.
and now how large are your garden spaces? Do they vary in size, or kind of what's that look like?
Yeah, so we have 3 products planned. The tiny farm are beginning to deploy. Then the tiny grove does 20 times the volume of the tiny farm, and then we have something called the tiny orchard. So the tiny farm is more of a consumer unit. It goes inside um, a restaurant dining room, for instance. It can go inside the classroom, and you can grow enough greens, mainly microgreens, that you can eat daily from it. The tiny grove is something that we would put into a commercial kitchen, like a restaurant kitchen, or in if you think about a senior living home, they also have a canteen or a kitchen. So we will put the tiny grove in there, and we might line them up. So people will be able to the chefs. That's what our target there are chefs, and the chefs would harvest the food and grow for the residents on premises. So that's what our plan is for our product.
Oh, wow. That sounds really cool. Well, thank you for sharing about the different sizes and kind of like what your products are and services are looking like for the future. Kind of diving into, I always like to ask a challenge you may have faced on your journey. I'm sure as a startup, there's many things going on, but is there a challenge that stands out to you that you faced that you were able to overcome, and how did you do it?
Um, the journey is wrought with challenges, and I think the biggest challenge that I would pick up is we're running a hardware business. As a startup, usually like a Bosch, which is in the business of producing stuff, microwaves, appliances, so on and so forth, ovens and ranges. Um, they're unnatural to produce another product and innovate a new product, like a new vacuum cleaner or whatever. When a startup does it, it is immensely challenging. You just need so much money. And
Mm,
so to run a hardware startup in an age of SaaS and software, startups, is has been very difficult to get the attention of the correct investors. So
mm,
investors are drunk on software businesses and the immediacy of the return on their investment, meaning, within 3 to 5 years, they're getting their money back and then some. With a hardware startup, the tail is a lot longer. And so the
mhm.
run up is a lot longer. And so that's really the main challenge that I'd say we're facing.
Oh, definitely. That makes a lot of sense to me too, especially when you're looking at production and different elements of that.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for
And
sharing
design.
that and design,
Yeah.
all those things for sure. So now I'd like to dive into a very fun part of the conversation where I ask you four questions and you answer very top of mind. And we call this our rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
I am super excited. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Fire away.
All right. Question number one is, what is the key to success for you?
I would say tenacity and working on something that is purposeful.
Love those. Second question is, what is a piece of advice you have for other business owners?
Wow. Um, I would say that I would say that resilience in business is a function of serving the community. I think we're moving away from a pure financial model, a pure profit incentive. I think we're moving into an age, especially with the turn of the millennials, um, into an age where a business has to have at least a triple bottom line, if not more: health of the human, health of the planet.
Mm.
Um, so people, planet, profits, they all have to be balanced out. And I think that has to be the rudimentary DNA of any business.
I really like that. Definitely. I just wrote that down. So, and then the third question is, what is maybe a book? It could be a piece of content, a podcast, anything you've taken in most recently.
I've started the Obstacle is the Way. It's a book by Ryan Holiday. And
Mm,
I think when you see a challenge, a lot of people try to skirt around the challenge, or when they see an objection arise, people try to skirt around it. But what we want to do is go head on. So there's a book
mm,
written along it. It's just like, boom, oh my God, that's the energy. I want that book. I want to read that book. So the
mhm.
Obstacle is the Way is the current beat that I have.
That sounds like a great book. And our final question is, if you could wave a magic wand and overnight improve one aspect of your business, what would it be?
I would probably say manufacturing. Manufacturing is a very, very designer manufacturing. There's a concept called design for manufacturing. And that has been our biggest challenge yet because we're dealing with water, we're dealing with soil, and we're dealing with consumer appliance. That is such a big challenge. And I wish if could wave it, I wish that I could just wave it and say, it's done.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. This has been such a great conversation. And definitely let's get people plugged into your business. How can they get involved?
Well, our website is modgarden.com, modgarden.com, and then the same handle for Instagram and Twitter. And that's the best way. Right now, I would say keep track of us, watch us if you have an interest, and then when we launch, let us know, and we'll let you know when we're coming to you a neighborhood near you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. For our last question today, what is most inspiring to you today?
Um, I would say that the world moving in this direction of, there's a lot of chatter about climate change and sustainability and all these words that are thrown around, sometimes vacuously.
Mm,
Sustainable is just an overused word. But regardless, I think that there are little kindles across the world that are being lit in the direction of making Earth a better place
mm.
instead of pillaging from it. I think um, coming back to Earth, looking at its resources, but returning more back to Earth than we took from it is
Oh,
something
that
that's
is
that's inspiring to me these days.
that is very powerful. Well, thank you again so much for being on the podcast. It's been a joy to talk to you today.
My pleasure, my privilege.